Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Live at the Waterhole. We're first up. We're in the Etosha National Park of Namibia at Okokoyo. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth. Also on the YouTube live chat. What would you like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it through. Looks to be pretty breezy coming in from the west. A couple of animals down, but there has been a little bit of rain around, so that does normally mean the animals migrate within Etosha and head more so onto the eastern side of the reserve, closer to Namutoni. However, we still do see some, I think it's springbok there, off on the other side. Reasonably open day. There doesn't seem to be too many clouds. Don't think it's going to rain today, but who knows? So, Brian, you're already on board with us. That's great. And thanks for your comment. Nice to have you on board as well. What does the bush hold in store for us today? That is the question. Yesterday was rather rainy across all the different locations, except for here in Etosha, but a little bit quiet here too. So there was quite a bit of birding that we did. We also had a lovely family of warthogs at Jamala, little piglets keeping us thoroughly entertained. It's like it might be an oryx off on the right-hand side, just contemplating if it's going to come down for a drink. So, Michael, thanks for your question. And yes, there's a lot of animals here in Etosha. Huge herds of zebra, blue wildebeest, springbok, a little bit more in the thickets, lots of black-faced impala, lots of elephants, many prides of lions, lots of cheetah, lots of leopards. So it's a wonderful, wonderful reserve, this, and a really special landscape as well. During the dry season, this waterhole is extremely productive. It's one of the best waterholes in the entire reserve. And this is why it's a huge tourist attraction. And it's also floodlit at night with a spotlight. So very nice to see the night animals or night active animals coming in for a drink. We often have the lions here. It's the Ombika Pride. There's 20 plus of them. And it used to be a coalition of two males that were in that pride, but I'm not sure how the dynamics have changed recently. Might hear some human voices. It's this camera is just above the viewing area of this waterhole, so the tourists will come in and normally after their morning game drive around this time of the day, I'd come and sit and watch here and see what comes down. Another springbok in on the right, just starting to have a drink. So we're going a little bit closer, and you'll see springbok, they don't need to drink water in their entire lives. That's how well adapted they are to desert environments. But when there is water available, they'll make use of it, and they seem to love going for a swim here as well. But it's normally when it's very hot, and I think today might be a little bit cooler than your average. France, thanks for your question. And well, obviously, springbok being quite slender, small little antelope, they're not particularly dominant as a species, but I'm sure you're referring to more in their numbers. Yes, it's springbok would be the largest in numbers throughout Etosha, and it's probably closely followed by zebra and wildebeest, as well as impala. But I would say yes, the most numerous species in the park, definitely springbok. And just some interesting info on springbok is that fossil springbok are known from the Pliocene era. An antelope appears to have evolved about 3 million years ago from a gazelle-like ancestor. Three fossil species of Antidorcus, and obviously the Latin name or the genus and the species of springbok is Antidorcus marsupialis. But there's been three fossil species of the Antidorcus genus have been identified, and in addition to the extant form, and appear to have been widespread across Africa. And two of them, it's the Antidorcus bondi and Antidorcus australis, became extinct around 7,000 years ago, which was the early Holocene era. And a third species, Antidorcus recae, probably gave rise to the extant form Antidorcus marsupialis, which is in fact the springbok that we're seeing here during the Pleistocene era, about 100,000 years ago. Fossils have been reported from the Pliocene, Pleistocene, and Holocene sites in northern, southern, and eastern Africa. And those fossils dating back to 80 and 100,000 years ago have been excavated at Herald's Bay Cave in the Western Cape province of South Africa and Florisbad in the Free State, respectively.
For those in the wet and cold this festive season, transport yourself to a warm and sunny Africa. With virtual safaris in real time, interact with African naturalists, connect with fellow nature lovers across the globe, fall in love with nature, and join the WildEarth family this festive season. WildEarth, connecting you to nature.
Now, this for me, the Oryx gazella or the Gemsbok, one of the most elegant of the antelope out there. I'd have to say the most regal of the lot. Looks like he might have had enough. Well, we might have some zebra starting to make their way through as well. So, just a little bit of information from my Bible, which is the living deserts of Southern Africa. Whenever I'm in the desert, I use this book a lot. The information is just fantastic on the adaptations of living in a water scarce environment. And speaking of large desert ungulates, when large desert ungulates such as eland, gemsbok, red hartebeest, and blue wildebeest become water stressed and can no longer spare water for evaporative cooling by skin sweating. They solve their temperature problems in an ingenious manner. They allow their body temperature to increase but keep their brain temperature cool. This they can do by means of a blood flow radiator known as the carotid rete system, which was discovered more than 2,000 years ago by the Greek physician Herophilus. The system's design is simple, elegant, and effective. It cools the blood going to the brain. Gemsbok or oryx do not routinely seek shade during the heat of the day, so they sweat in order to maintain a constant body temperature. If, however, an animal is water stressed and can no longer afford the moisture loss, it stops sweating and it allows its body temperature to rise, sometimes to as much as 43 degrees Celsius, which would kill most people and animals as well. In effect, it is storing heat, which is an advantage in that it increases the pulling power for heat flow from the body. It's quite interesting. To keep cool, you actually heat yourself up. Now, this is obviously Gemsbok being a large animal. It has a small surface area to volume ratio compared with springbok or steenbok, and it heats up slowly. Its maximum body temperature is reached only towards the end of the day when the air is already starting to cool again. The carotid artery feeds the brain with blood freshly renewed with oxygen in the lungs. And this blood, which at the same temperature as that of the body, would kill the gemsbok outright if it were to enter the brain case at a temperature of 43 degrees. Fortunately, though, it doesn't. Immediately before entering the brain case, the carotid artery splits into a maze of smaller arteries, which intertwine closely with a similar maze of veins which carry venous blood back to the heart from the nasal sinuses in the gemsbok's nostrils. And this network of interwoven blood vessels is known as the carotid rete system. When the gemsbok is dehydrated, it starts to pant, thus reducing the temperature of the venous blood in the nasal sinuses through evaporative cooling to a few degrees lower than the body temperature. As this cooler blood flows in the opposite direction to the warm carotid blood in the carotid rete system, heat flows from the warmer to the cooler blood by a process known as countercurrent heat exchange. And in this way, the blood entering the brain can be cooled from 43 degrees to 40 degrees. And this may seem a small difference, but in terms of survival, it's a huge difference. And it's been suggested that the carotid rete system may be the most important adaptation that allows antelope, and not only the larger ones, to inhabit the hot and dry deserts of southern and northern Africa. If desert ungulates were to attempt to maintain their normal body temperature by skin sweating alone, they would lose more water than they could ever hope to replace on a daily basis without drinking. However, by restricting temperature control to the heat-sensitive brain and allowing the body temperature to rise, vast amounts of water are saved. During and particularly at the end of a hot day, large antelopes simply offload the heat that they have stored in their bodies. For instance, gemsbok in the Namib and the Kalahari deserts frequently retire to the top of a high rise or sand dune and stand side on to oncoming cool evening breezes. The thinner fur on their flanks, with its relatively poor insulation, is an advantage because it permits this heat to be offloaded quickly. And so one of the reasons why these very special desert adapted antelope are able to survive in these conditions. Okay, M, you often confuse springbok and impala. I'm hoping that at some stage we'll have some black-faced impala coming down here and then, standing next to the springbok. And then it's a nice, lovely comparison. First and foremost, springbok are quite a bit smaller than impala. And a nice clear-cut difference as well is that the impalas, only the males have horns with impala. Whereas springbok, all of them have, both male and female. The female's horns are just a little bit thinner than the male's, or probably about half the thickness of the males, if not, even thinner than that. So that's the only difference you can tell between male and female springbok. But with impala, nice and easy. Males are the only ones with horns. The horns of impala are quite, they're probably more than double the size of springbok horns. And impalas sort of have different shades of brown. It's like a reddy, fawny color, but they just have different shades of that on their body. Whereas the springbok, they've got a white belly and then this like black stripe, and then the fawny color on top. So if we see them next to each other, you could actually see that they're quite different. And being next to each other, difficult to, confuse the two. So that's why it would be nice if at some stage we get to see both next to each other. Springbok also like being more out in the open plains, whereas impala, they prefer being more so in the thickets. They're not as fast as springbok, but they are very agile, through the bush. So that's much better for them in terms of predator avoidance. Nice to have some stripes, zebbies coming in for a drink.
Family is one of nature's masterpieces. Come along and embrace it with the WildEarth family. Our expert naturalists will spend the day tracking and spotting the families of the safari and explain family dynamics in the wild. The memories we make with our family are everything. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
So most likely this is one harem of zebra. So it would be a stallion with his group of females. You can hear pied crows just calling around this waterhole as well. So when you go to the game reserve and well, staying in chalets, staying at lodges, etc., um, very often it's monkeys and baboons that are quite a problem, and obviously, especially if you leave your door, your windows open, and they get inside, especially getting into the kitchen, they can destroy the place, make a real mess. So, you know, often game reserves are plagued by baboons and monkeys, and obviously keep the tourists on their toes. Here at Okukuyu, not really, you don't see baboons much here at all. You'll have baboons in the park, but I've never seen them in this area. Monkeys either. But the problem that you have in at Okukuyu are jackals. They come around the camp during the day and during the night, and anything that you leave open, or the likes of leather shoes, leather gloves, anything that can be eaten will be picked up and stolen by the jackals. So that's from, yeah, as I say, I've had guests, their shoes disappearing up the road, their bags disappearing up the road. The jackal just grabs it and runs off. And much like baboons and monkeys, then they go try and get to a safe place before they then get stuck in and see what they can eat there. So, just a word of warning, anybody going to visit Okukuyu or Etosha in general, you got to be careful for the jackals in the campsite. Not so much that they're any danger. They can be at certain times because there is rabies that is prevalent. So the rangers ask the public to report any jackals with really strange behavior, and showing any of the rabies symptoms. It's a little bit difficult because normally a rabies symptom would be that the animal doesn't have any fear. But the jackals in Okukuyu camp don't have much fear because they've gotten used to the tourists and the food availability. And there's also often people that feed the jackals too. There's lots of signs everywhere saying please don't feed any wild animals, but people still do it. And so the behavior is they're not scared anyway. So it's a little bit difficult to pick up when the jackals do in fact have rabies. But they can sort of exhibit a little bit more crazy type behavior. But that's the only thing to really worry about, the jackals. It's just more so of a nuisance, and your stuff disappearing and the dustbins being knocked over, and they may make quite a mess as well. So, Maddie, thanks for your question. And yeah, weighing up whether tourist attractions and tourist spots are good things, I would have to say absolutely, unequivocally, 100% yes, Maddie, because when I studied conservation at Pretoria Technikon, and one of the first things that we learned as conservationists is that if it pays, it stays. So if there's no monetary, we need to find ways of putting monetary value onto wildlife. Otherwise, it's going to, probably be turned into an agricultural or livestock farm. And the local communities, if they weren't benefiting in any way, well, they would start taking out the wildlife, and that's for sure. And then bringing in farming. So I think it's very, very important that we have tourists that are coming in and paying. They're helping uplift the local communities. They're bringing in an economic value to the wildlife. And for me, it's the least sort of bad form of creating money for wildlife is, people just coming through, viewing them, going on safari. Um, so, what is the alternative? It's hunting, it's and farming. So I think very important to bring as many tourists as we can through here. Obviously, still trying to maintain the ethics of taking people out on safari. The disadvantages, lots of people. It sort of does take away a little bit from the wildlife. Would you say the experience when you have lots of people in these kind of game reserves? But like I say, it's a small sacrifice. And probably the best sacrifice, if I can say, to ultimately maintain these conservation areas. Massive overheads. They've got a huge fence line, um, so there's also a lot of personnel. There's a lot of infrastructure. Everything needs to be upkept, and so on. So yeah, I would say very, very important to have these tourist attractions, because without them, I don't think they would be remaining as they are. All right, so I think this is probably the only sunny location across southern Africa currently. Yeah, further on the west of the tip of southern Africa. But that being said, I think we still go and just have a look around at the other spots, and let's go to the Greater Kruger Park and Juma. Where there's been lots and lots of rain. I think it might still be raining a little bit. A very wet day. Nonetheless, we'll still have a look. We'll still keep zooming around. I'm hoping we have a predator pop out today. It's nice, cool weather. There's a lot more chance when it's like this. We need some spots walking through those thickets. That looks like Dewey, the resident bull hippopotamus. So, Candace, glad to hear that you use this water hole when it's rainy to go to sleep. Dewey looks like he's also gone to sleep. So, not extremely wet everywhere. There has been a little bit of rain here where we've come across to at Jamala. It doesn't look like it currently is. It's still coming down in Juma, that's for sure. But there has been a bit of rain around here in the last couple of days, so it has gone a little bit quiet here as opposed to the last few weeks where there's literally been hundreds of elephants coming through and it's been nice and hot. Let's see these two meeting up. The bigger one going to push his weight around a bit, I think. Looks like they're heading for a drink. So I think that fresh water is currently not flowing. And that's why the elephants are now forced to actually drink from the waterhole itself, not where that fresh water sort of pours out. So Cameron, I think it's quite important just to check the kind of greeting ceremonies that elephants partake in. I mean, even between these two bulls, um, difficult to tell if they actually knew each other prior to this. But the way that they greeted each other does give me the sense that, I think they do, or they have, met each other before, at least. But you saw that younger one, a little bit subordinate to the bigger bull, as you would expect. So as he came up, the smaller one sort of put his trunk in the mouth area, and sometimes they even put it inside the mouth um, of another individual, and then they sort of sniff it, back again. So immediately, then the bigger one sort of pushed his weight around. It's almost like punching him on the shoulder. How's a buddy? But he's still dominant, bigger than him, and he's just reminding him of that. So, Tato, you noticing that this seems to be a young elephant? Yeah, it is. It's probably in his mid-teens, like I would say between 13 and 15 years of age. So he's still got quite a way to go before he's fully mature, which is normally at around 30 or so. So, yeah, not quite there just yet. Another one, quite a bit bigger, a lot more mature. I would say mid 20s, if not closer to 30. So those elephants now seem to be on their way out of here. So we'll just see what else is around. Right, so it looks pretty quiet for now, but we'll keep an eye on this spot, and if anything comes through, we'll come right back. So I think for now, let's go back to the sun in Etosha. And we can see here in the foreground these Egyptian geese with their little chicks that have survived. That is great. Not all of them have. What's that? One, two, three, four, five. I think there were seven one stage. So probably jackals have gotten themselves some food in the form of Egyptian geese chicks. So, Catherine, I think you must have been at Okokoyo, saying that the jackals even tried to take your food while you were still eating. Yeah, they are very naughty in this camp. So you got to be very careful. And I always what I normally do is I just walk around and gather myself a number of stones, make a little pile, and then whenever I see one anywhere near the camp, I can just keep them at bay and throw stones at them. I never really hit them; they're very quick, but it does then just keep them a little bit further away from your camp. And I found another quite fun way of keeping them at bay because also during the night, you always have to lift your dustbin up, put it up on a table, or put a massive rock on top of the lid so that they can't get into it. Otherwise, you hear it get knocked over during the night and you wake up and the contents have been spread all around the place. So it's very messy. So, what I used to do is very often sleeping on top of the truck or also top of the Land Rover. It's one of my preferred spots, nice out under the stars. Um, and I used to take up with me a small pile of stones. And then when I used to see the jackals coming into my camp, I used to just quietly take a stone and just lob it near to the springbok without them hearing or seeing me. And the stone landing next to them, and they don't know where it's come from. You see them jump in about a meter into the air, looking in every direction. They don't know what is going on. and that's it, and then they freeze. And that's the first stone. When the second stone comes, they're gone. Pew! So, and I still don't know where the stone is coming from. So a bit of new growth there, the grass coming through. You can just see a little bit. That's obviously what these Egyptian geese are feeding on. There's another one there. So it looks like I'm pretty sure there were 7 of them. Now there's 6. So one has obviously fallen foul to a jackal, I think. So Simone, yeah, lots of bird names do get changed. I think the Egyptian goose though is quite iconic because of the sort of historical relevance, and with the Egyptians holding these geese in very high regard. There's a lot of depictions of Egyptian geese. I think in the hieroglyphics and all the sort of ancient drawings of the Egyptians. So, and I don't know of another bird. Well, I mean, it's only the Egyptian geese. I don't know, and I'm pretty sure that there's not anywhere else that has a different bird called the same name. So that's very often when they do change names. It's from East Africa versus Southern Africa, and we've got the same name as a different bird. Then they, try to separate them to change the name. But in this instance, I think it's probably going to stay the same. As they all now run off to the water with their little wings out. So, Lorraine, I'm glad that you have been to Etosha, and I think it is one of those places that will always create special memories. I've been here hundreds of times, but I still find it very, very special.
The world is celebrating Trivia Day, and WildEarth wants to share little trinkets of knowledge with you.
Poison is something, if you ingest, will kill you. Venom has to be injected.
Come along for a hilarious day and be entertained with our team trivia. Our expert naturalists across locations will pair up and compete in wildlife trivia in a battle to be the smarty pants of the safari. Don't miss out on the action. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
So there's still quite a few animals just milling around there off over on the other side of the waterhole in the distance. Right, so a little bit quiet here, but there are a few animals coming through. But I think let's change of place. Let's head to the Greater Kruger Park in Djuma. Well, just look at that. Quite a bit of rain around, hey? Rather windy as well. You can hear crested barbet calling. And I think most animals are going to be in the thickets, just trying to stay out of the elements a little bit. So in this kind of weather, you're lucky if you're a burrowing species and you can get into your hole and get right out of this weather. So Theo, this is actually great rain. It's not pouring down. Does seem like it's coming down reasonably heavy, but as I say, it's not really going to create any flooding. It's going to depend on how long it continues for. But this, like I say, it's great rain because it's penetrating the soil. It's just continuing, slowly but steadily is the best rain to get, because if it's cloud bursts and you have high surface runoff, and you can get quite a bit of erosion when that happens as well. So that's detrimental. But a nice, long, slow, steady rain, that's the best rain that you could ask for. So you see these blacksmith lapwings, they're just waiting it out. There's not much they can do. So, Michelle, there are a couple of birds that do nest in the ground. The terrestrial woodpecker, they like going on river banks, or the ground woodpecker, um, and they'll go in there. African hoopoes, quite a number of bee eaters, as well as kingfishers. They'll all go in the banks of a river. And then the likes of South African shell ducks and blue swallows will actually use not termite mound, aardvark burrows, and they go in there and they nest in those old used burrows, as well as the southern ant-eating chat. So there's a number of birds that, in fact, do go into the ground and nest there. So just scanning, see what we can find. Yesterday we had some dwarf mongoose. Earlier on also we did have southern ground hornbills, but they disappeared. So James, there might be a few more frogs, with this kind of weather having come through. But the real explosion is sort of when we get those first rains in spring. So we've already had that explosion, but very often when it rains, we'll have the likes of bushveld rain frogs that will start coming out of the ground, because they'll only come out in and around this kind of weather. So immediately after it stops, you'll probably hear mwap, mwap, lots of them calling, but they'll go back under the ground as soon as it starts drying out again. So yeah, a little bit of an increase, but not like that increase we have at the beginning of spring. We need that little family of warthogs to come back again today and keep us entertained. That was just wonderful yesterday with the mother and her 4 little piglets. So I think we just got to be a little bit patient today. There's not going to be as much activity as per usual because it's not hot at all, I think, across all the different locations. Typical call of the blacksmith lapwing. Come on, we need some wild doggies coming through here now. So, Brian, yeah, quite a good question that. This is the kind of weather that catfish could move between waterholes, but they would have to have a reason for that. Um, Normally, that the one that they're in, there's no food in there, or it's busy drying out, and so on. So, yeah, good time to move if you're going to, but very often they'll, the water hole that they are in will be being replenished now. So you don't really find like a mass movement of catfish. It's the odd fish that will do this kind of thing. It doesn't happen all the time. Okay, so still pretty quiet here now that the elephants have left. So once again, I think let's head back to the sun and Etosha National Park. At least we've got some animals here. even though some of them are taking their time to come down for a drink, we'll still have a bit of a flow of springbok, oryx, zebra, maybe even some blue wildebeest. If we're lucky, maybe even some giraffe. The elephants seem to have disappeared, so not much chance of them. As we hear a yellow-billed hornbill just near to the camera here. The lone oryx on the left there. Number of springbok and zebra. So, Daniel, you want to know why the animals are, just standing around like this, looking like they're frozen? Well, at this time of the day, it's normally the hottest part of the day. And so the animals are just resting at this time, so they're not expending unnecessary energy, and they'll wait for it to be cooler to become more active. So this time of the day is all about getting a snooze, getting some rest, maybe coming and getting some water, and then once it cools off a bit, then they become more active.
Our UK family is important to us. WildEarth is making your viewing experience more convenient with a time shift that will see a delayed start. Our sunrise safari will now be broadcast at UK sunrise times. Don't miss a moment of your favorite shows. To watch it live, go to the WildEarth app or website.
Incredible.
WildEarth, connecting you to nature.
So not too long, and we'll also be introducing all of the AfriCam locations. So that does open up lots more spots that we can have a look at, but I'm pretty sure there's still going to be lots and lots of rain about. A lot of South Africa is now under clouds and mostly wet. So, Dennis, thanks for your question. And This is the only waterhole for 15 kilometers to the south, which is where you'll find the Ombika waterhole. It's not very far from that gate to enter into the park. And then it's about another 15 kilometers to the north, where you would get Okundeka waterhole. It's right on the edge of the Etosha Pan itself. And then to the east, it's also about 15 kilometers, maybe a little bit less, and you get to Nabrownie waterhole, which is an extremely busy waterhole, often also with lions, as well as Okundeka. So it's like each of these waterholes has its own pride of lions, but the Okukuyu area here is sort of under the Ombika pride of lions territory. So they'll be in between this waterhole and the Ombika waterhole to the south. But because of the distance of these waterholes apart from each other, it obviously does then attract a lot of animals, particularly so when it's dry. So just a few seconds away from introducing the Africam waterholes. And we've gone to a new camera for me in Mabula. But of course, the weather is very similar to Djuma. Okay, and just a reminder to everybody that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. So, and also just a bit of information on Mabula, situated at the foothills of the Waterberg Mountains in a private game reserve, and it's one of Africa's hidden secrets. It's situated at the foothills of the Waterberg within the 10,000 hectare Mabula private game reserve. They've got the big five. They've also got more than 300 recorded bird species, very similar to the sort of greater Kruger area.